right, I'm good. If you want to record on your end and back up.
Yep, got the backup going.
All right, super sweet. Well, we can begin whenever you're ready, Gabby.
Okay, awesome. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Eternal Void, but with jazz. This week we are joined by Magnus Malleus. Magnus Malleus is a non-traditional alchemist from Chicago, Illinois, USA. His alchemical practice involves theurgy, philosophy, and divination. He is devoted to the kemetic goddess Hathor. He considers himself atheo-pagan and has experienced UPG. His first book will be available in 2026. He also holds a bachelor's degree in philosophy. His other interests include Jungian psychology, crystal power, 19th century evolutionism, anarchism, playing ukulele, gluten-free living, hard rock, paranormal technology, cemeteries, and much more. Hi, Malleus. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for coming on the show.
We covered about everything there.
Yeah, a lot of really fun interests and topics. So I think this is going to be an awesome episode. And hi, Michelle. How are you?
I am doing great. Thank you so much. I am really excited to be here, but I do need to step away for like 30 seconds and attend to something making a noise in the kitchen. Y'all go ahead and I will be right back.
Okay, cool. Should we wait? Do you want me to ask questions or?
No, keep going. I'll be right back.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, I have a cat too. I understand. Go take care of it.
Yeah. So Magnus, tell us a little bit about you and a little bit about the work you've been up to lately. What have you been working on?
Well, I started my alchemical journey back in 2017. And since that time, I use my apparatus, and I use my apparatus 100 times and documented the results of my what I call runs with my apparatus. And then I took all my notes from my documentation and other various writings I did during that time when I was from dreams and trances and just feelings, and I compiled them all into a one written document. And I decided at some point, I'm I should really make a book out of this. So I started working on that. So I finally completed a draft of this book this year, a few months ago. And I've been working on getting a print version of that ready to go. And also, and make it available on the Kindle and other ebook form. I want to get the word out to the public. So I've been working on that, getting I realized along the way, it's it's such a weird kind of book that I didn't think any traditional publishing outlets were going to be interested in me at all. So I decided to just go my own route of seeing if I could self-publish. So that turned into kind of opening another can of worms. So I had to learn how to what I would need to do in order to self-publish my book. So I did some research on that and been incorporating that into my activities. And so I think that it's well underway. Just today, I was proofreading a draft that the printer sent back to me. And I did, find some errors on it. So it's going to have to go back and be resubmitted. But we're getting near the end of that process. And if all goes well, in May of this year, May of 2026, my book that I've been working on for 9 years will be released. And I'm excited about that. Along the way, too, because I had to start a publishing company in order to do this. It seemed like I needed a presence for the actual publishing company. So what I did is I got involved with a company that hosts websites. And so I purchased a service through this company. So I'm going to have my own website also that's going to be for promoting my book, of course, and any other projects written projects that I'd want to host there. So that's exciting too, so it's been a lot going on at one time. It was kind of one thing led to another, one project kind of led to other issues that needed resolutions. And it kind of made it to be a busy period for me. So I've been working on all these things concurrently, but it's all kind of coming together. My website, I was hoping to have it ready for launch today, but there's a it's really about done, but I'm just waiting for the bookstore portion of it, where I can get some links from the printers and stuff, because I think it's going to be available for sale through this company that does the printing and stuff. It's kind of like I outsourced that part of it. So there's a few things I need to get ready, but otherwise the website itself is looking pretty good too. It was my first really foray into using any kind of artificial intelligence in creating this website, because I know nothing of website design. And there are some interesting tools for putting together a website that it builds out the whole layout for you and fills in all the spaces with what it thinks that you ought to talk about. It's really amazing. So when you look at it, it's like, oh, that's actually pretty good, even though, each individual thing, when you look at it, you're like, well, I would change that definitely. But it really does a kind of a good job of trying to get in your head and in reproducing what you want to say. I'm not saying that it's something you'd want to use for every kind of creative project that you do, but if it's something where you have to do something, but you really don't want to become an expert on it, but you want it to be at least semi-professional, it was kind of a good option on that. So I'm really ambivalent about the whole AI integration thing. I think it's another thing. I think we're really on the front end of the historical curve on that. So I'm cautiously using it when I have to. Otherwise, I really like doing things the old-fashioned way. But that's been kind of the AI integration part of my my project here, and it's been kind of interesting, a little creepy, but interesting and kind of fun too. So that's where I've been at. Yeah, it's like a 3-point thing. It's like, yes, I wrote a book, and now I need a publishing company, and now I need a website. It's like, this is kind of a weird stuff for an occultist to be doing. Normally, I just sitting in a dark room with my books and chanting a lot and stuff like that. But I guess you have to have different ways of doing your job, and it's a different kind of compartments. So so that's what I've been doing. It's been fun. It's been kind of a labor of love. I'm kind of going to be happy when it's kind of running by itself, so that I just have the website going and then take a little break and do some, work with the guys a little bit, and then see if maybe another project starts worming into my psyche. So we'll see. I'm hoping to take a little break, because it has been fairly intense, especially the last few months. But then, the reality is once my project's completed to the point where I have a print book in my hand, well then, I have to see who's interested in it. So my first plan, I think, for the summer, once my book's completed and I have a copy in my hand, I think I'm going to make a list of all the cool crystal shops and witchy stores and all these places in my region. And I'm just going to have to make a pilgrimage and go meet everybody who runs these places, put a copy in their hand, and bring a bag of bagels or whatever, and hang out and see what's going on. I live in a pretty big metropolitan area, so I'm guessing there's going to be quite a number of those addresses on my list. So I'm looking forward to that. That's really going to be my theme of the summer, actually.
That's really cool. I would love to get my hands on a copy of your book and I forget what you called it, your apparatus.
Yes.
I heard about this for the first time last night. Can we explain a little bit about that?
Sure. What happened was this. I'll give you the brief synopsis. Back in let me just open and check my date here. I don't want to give information that's incorrect here. Let me open up a file. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, it was 2017. I had my first trance where I was in contact with the personality, which I later became aware of as the goddess Hathor. And she was talking to me during this trance, but when I awoke the next day, I didn't really remember anything of what she was saying. I didn't remember any of the words. It just, if I tried to remember, all I just heard was a sound of a voice. But I did have some images in my head. And I normally I'm a musician too and a songwriter, so I carry notebooks around, especially when I travel and stuff. So I had some notebooks with me, and I had some images in my head, and I just started jotting down these images. They're just like squares and triangles and lines and in fields and stuff like this. I didn't know what it was. But over the next few nights, I had a few more of these trances, and it was the same kind of thing. I couldn't remember what the woman was telling me, but I had images in my head. So again, I sketched out a couple images. So this was all happening when I was traveling in Europe at the time. So when I came back to Chicago, I had all these notebooks with me, and I was like wondering what it was that happened to me. I didn't really know. So I looked at these images, and I just intuitively knew that it was something that I had to make. So, I tried to figure, I started to look at the sketches like they were some kind of blueprint. So I did that, and I started to try to intuit like what could be the materials that I would use to make the thing. And, I eventually, I was working at a factory at the time, an industrial situation where there's all kinds of stuff laying around that people use to build like assembly lines and maintenance. There was just warehouses just full of stuff. So as I was walking around in my job, as I walked around the factory, I would just look at things. I'd be like, that type of thing maybe that's what it is that makes this, or, and I just I actually, collected some of the stuff or took photos of it. If there was something that was thrown in the garbage at work, then, ended up in my lunchbox, maybe something like that. But, and also, I was looking online when I saw things online. If let's say I was on Amazon, I had to buy a filter for the furnace at the house or something like that. Then I might come across something, then I would be like, wow, maybe that's that part. Maybe that's a part of the arm or whatever, whatever I was looking at. So over a period of time, I had enough idea for parts that I actually decided I was going to purchase whatever I could not, that I didn't find or make myself. And I purchased a few items, and I built the thing. And I wish I could say it went through a rigorous testing kind of protocol, but it did not. I put the thing together, and I started using it, and it worked right away. There was no, I would totally have expected there to be major problems. When you build something, and just start using it, I didn't know what the purpose was of it. I built it. I built the thing, and I turned it on, and it turned on, and the output of it was something that I thought that I could work with at the time. So that's how it came about. It was just kind of an intuitive thing based on the fact that I could not understand what this person in my trance was telling me to do. So what happened? So I have this apparatus. I know it works because it turns on. When I say it works, it seems to operate, but I didn't know what it was for. I had no idea. And at this point, I'm not really an occultist. I'm just a guy who's I read a little philosophy, and I work in my job, and play music. But I was not an occultist. I'm not fully versed on all the history of occultism and all these things. So I was just kind of playing around with this thing. And I realized that it was doing what I thought it was supposed to do, but I didn't know what it was for. It was a missing piece. So it's kind of strange to have something that you built, and it wasn't obvious. It didn't look like a sculpture, like an artistic thing. It looked like an industrial thing. So it was kind of a mystery until I had a further trance where I saw a design, like a mandala or a circular design with spokes and sections in it. And then I kind of intuitively put these two pieces together and realized that there was a decoding that need. This is some kind of device that I could make a message and then use the mandala or use this other portion of the intuition as a decoding system. So that's when it kind of came together for me, that I realized what it was that I had here. And because this all came about because I couldn't really understand what was being told to me, I realized that, this may be a communication device, a theurgical communication device, so that this personality who I'd met in the psychic realm who wanted to communicate with me, yet I was not up to the task, that maybe this was her way of saying, hey, if you use this, we'll be able to communicate together. So, once I started using it and realized that I could come up with messages based on the output of this device, it all kind of came together in a flash, and I knew that was what was happening. I don't think it was not the goddess's issue that she was not doing her job. It was just that me as a receiver of the message, I think I was not up to the task. So she was helping me to come up with this device so that I could hear her message and for real what she had to say. So that's kind of the background of the apparatus. And if it's not a very complicated apparatus. That's why my whole book is not about all the complicated steps and the parts and all this. It's fairly simple. and it would not be much of an entertainment like going through the parts list and how it's actually put together. But I can say this without showing you my blueprints and my secret like device and all this, which I just don't know if I'm supposed to share those details or not. I can say it's a type of lamp. In the process that makes the message is kind of a photographic process. So what I have here is like an occult, a mystical lamp that creates the message from the goddess using a kind of a photographic process. Does that answer your question?
Yes, and opens the door to so many more that, yeah, and just Hathor giving you a type of lamp just seems very on point for just the image, the popular image of Hathor, right?
Oh, yes, and later on when I picked up a copy of like Greek magical papyri, and I looked into it and came across the sections where they were doing lamp divinations, like a lot arriving really kind of after the fact to like a classic occultism and classic magical works. It's like I get like a shock when I read something sometimes, and it's like, that's me. That's what I've been doing. But somebody else was doing it 2,000 years ago, or back in remote times. It still comes to me as a shock because I had not really been an expert on it or really been exposed to a lot of those texts before. But when I do come across them, I just find so many connections and so many intuitive. I feel like I'm transported back in time a lot when I come across something that really resonates with what I'm doing. From coming at it from like an after the fact kind of. I had no idea this was out there, And a good example of that is the lamp divination and the lamp spells that are used in Greek magical papyri. A lot of them, I could see also a lot of it like a kind of a primitive animation type effect. I'm sure was in use back then because you can always feel that when they're describing how the visions on the walls of the chamber and stuff, and things like that, because that they were using kind of like projection type technologies even back then to do some of these lamp visionation, lamp divination like techniques. So it's really exciting for me to come across readings and have them resonate so much with what I'm doing. And I'm becoming I'm not saying I'm an expert at anything. That's the beauty of being an kind of into evolutionary philosophy. The thing is to like be aware of everything, but be an expert on nothing is kind of like my background. So, but it is important to me when I read something and it really resonates and vibrates with me. And I'm like, I know that this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah, that is just so fascinating. And I can actually say that I've had a reading from you with this apparatus. And I remember from that reading, just all the information that came back was so accurate and just so kind of like relevant to what I was going through at the time. So I could definitely vouch for its efficacy too.
And are you still offering readings through the apparatus, or I understand that maybe that's something that's in the past for it now? I've been busy working on getting the manuscript done, but okay. But I think there is a section on the new website where I am going to offer some alchemical oracles. That's a kind of like I put in that category. I trained myself how to do tarot card readings because it's kind of like the common language of occultism is like to use tarot cards and to delve into like personalities and relationships and stuff. So I taught myself how to do that with the goddess's help because I wouldn't know where to start. And I didn't realize I was supposed to learn like card spreads and stuff like that when she just gave me my own kind of card spread. So I can do that too. And she actually gave me another method of doing divination, which is using what's called a geometrical solid, which it's an octahedron. It's a shape. I had it's made out of plastic. I had a guy who does like 3-dimensional printing, make this for me from a trance that I had. So I contacted a guy and he made this plastic octahedron, which is an 8-sided shape. It's like two. It looks like I can show. Here, while we're on the podcast, so I can't really show anybody. But if you can imagine 2 pyramids stuck together at their bases, that's what an octahedron looks like. It's an 8-sided. So the goddess showed me a way that I could do divinations using this 8-sided solid. So I'm going to offer that on my website too. I don't expect that to really take off. I'm sure, I have really zero credibility when it comes to doing divinations, but, I'm going to start. So, I think that
it can only go up from here is my viewpoint on it. But yeah, it's all going to be available on my website, and that's going to be up and running very soon.
Yes, all of it. I wish you the most success on all of this. This is fun. Okay.
Yeah, thanks. It's going to be a lot of new stuff for me because I'm kind of an introverted guy, and all of my projects that are for this summer and moving forward are going to bring me out of my introverted state, out face to face in the public with meeting really cool people in the occult and witchy spaces. So I'm totally psyched. Of course, because I'm into transformations and alchemy is about transformations. It's all part of my own personal journey. So I'm totally psyched about it and embracing it. And I can't wait. The future is bright, you might say.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear that. Yay.
Yes, we fully support you. And yeah, please let us know if the website goes live before this episode comes out, because we will definitely add it to the show notes and make sure people get where they're supposed to go. And I'm wondering, Michelle, if you're ready, would you like to talk a little bit more about alchemy? And
yes.
Awesome. Yeah. So we mentioned alchemy a couple times, and you describe yourself as a non-traditional alchemist. So could you please tell us a little bit about what alchemy is to you? Because I know there's different types of alchemy, and what it means to be a non-traditional alchemist.
Sure. Well, going back to what alchemy is in general, I think I could say, I'm sure that people would argue with me, but I think I can get pretty close to saying what the history is here, is that alchemy started out as being a kind of like the trade secrets of a certain types of industry back in ancient times, specifically metallurgy and dye making. Because I think back in ancient times, the trade secrets and the way that workers had to perform these types of tasks were kept secret, just like companies their formula for Coca-Cola or whatever and Pepsi are secret. I think they also had secret formulas and techniques and those types of works. And I think what we call alchemy evolved out of those techniques. And there's a few things that were common to most practices of alchemy. One would be like the use of some kind of energy, like a furnace or something like that. There's also the use of, there's also color change involved, usually with alchemical techniques. And thirdly, there's the use of a vessel. Those, I think, are the three main things that you could put every kind of alchemy, non-traditional, traditional, usually all has those things. It's a color change, a power source, and a vessel. Those are, I think, the three main things. Now, traditional alchemy, which is the precursor of modern chemistry, used a lot of furnaces, fire furnaces, heating chemical substances in a glassware containers or other types of containers in order to produce a new material out of that. That would be like a traditional alchemy. I'm non-traditional alchemy, probably closer related to the dye type production branch of alchemy, because my process, I told you, it's a lamp. So we have the energy from the lamp that causes changes in a material, color changes in a material, which then I use as a raw material to produce another type of material. And this final material is the knowledge that the goddess imparts to me from the whole process. So that's how I use the three basic parts of alchemy in my practice. But you can see it's non-traditional because I don't have a furnace, I don't use glassware, and I don't use a lot of chemicals. There's the chemicals that are part of my process are stuff that you would find certainly in your kitchen. They're not, it's not a big deal. But yeah, that the idea of the alchemical processes is that they use these three areas here. Also, a very, very common to all alchemy is the four elements: air, fire, water, and earth are in almost every alchemical practice. And a lot of times, even though this is a subject that probably gives me the most vexation, traditionally in alchemy, gender is an issue in alchemy, where a lot of times symbols are related to the male, the female, the king and the queen. So these elements are also part of alchemy. But as I explained, in my book and elsewhere, these symbols are what you make out of them. And, if for you, if like the gender symbols don't work for you, or you want to substitute something else for that, I'd certainly say you're still doing alchemy the right way, as if I would have a right to say one way or another. But I think that, those are the basic elements. You have I'll restate it again, just so we have the bullet pointed list here. We have the energy used would be the fire or light in my case, and you have the color change, and you have the vessel, the 4 elements, and 2 genders. Those are the basic recipe for alchemy. And if you want to add to that, the goal in alchemy seems to be create something new from a starting point material. You want to create something new and transform it into something new. So that's the basic touch. Those are the basic points of alchemy. And as a non-traditionalist, I refer to myself that way because I don't use fire, and I don't use glassware, and I don't boil chemicals in a furnace. What I use is my lamp. I use my lamp, which is electrical powered. It's light, it runs on light. Of course, it's a light bulb, and the light bulb itself contains elements, and it contains like chemical elements in it. So I get all those things like in a non-traditional way, in a modern way, I guess, through electricity and electric light and photographic processes. So that's why I'm a non-traditional alchemist. There are people still working who I met online who still like use furnaces, and they have retorts, which is like an enclosed glass vessel to do their transformations in, and some of them, there was the creation of gold was a traditional goal for alchemy, where alchemists claim to be creating real gold from other substances. And, I don't do that. What my final product is the knowledge that the goddess imparts to me. That's my gold. So that's how I'm a non-traditional alchemist. As a weird side note, I worked at an industrial plant that made nuclear medicine. And they had these 3 huge machines on site. They're called cyclotrons. What it is, it's a particle accelerator. It's they developed these things in the 50s and 60s, and they've been perfected as of recently. And the really incredible things that these machines do, and they're big machines. They're about as big as a Winnebago, as big as a semi truck. And what it does, and I think the old traditional alchemists would be proud, what this thing does is it actually makes one material and it changes it into another material, which was the goal of the traditional alchemists. And I think they would be happy to know that modern science actually fulfilled that part of their mission, because I've seen these machines at work, and what it does is it takes a piece of metal and it fires a beam of atomic particles at this piece of metal, and it changes that piece of metal from one kind of metal into another kind of metal, which I think was the goal of some of the traditional alchemists. And I had not seen gold created, it's true, but I did see, this company I used to work for, they took a piece of lead, and they made lead into thallium, which is kind of a metal you don't hear too much about, but it's kind of it's another kind of metal. And that metal, and so this metal was used in very expensive medical tests. And it was actually the metal that was created in this process was worth 30 times as much as gold was worth in terms of like monetary value. So I think, again, the traditional alchemist who split off into like what became modern science would be happy with their legacy, because I saw machines at work that accomplished what they were trying to do back in medieval times, but it actually came into reality. So I was proud of that. But you could tell from my work is more on the spiritual side of the split, because alchemy back in, post-medieval times, probably 18th century was the end of like the undifferentiated type of alchemy. That's where it split into kind of like the pre-science or early science, and then into a spiritualized version of alchemy that later, judging from what I've read and like about the evolution of those ideas into mysticism, and then further on into like the German idealism of philosophy. So you saw a split at the end of the 18th century into those 2 branches. So I think the branch that went into the scientific route would be very pleased with the output of their work. And of course, my branch, the spiritual side of things, we're still a work in progress. So we'll see how that goes.
Oh, that is so cool.
Yeah, yes, it is. I love how you brought into the cyclotrons, and those machines are just phenomenal. I want to kind of back up, if I may, just a little bit. So you mentioned that you had like a trance experience with the goddess Hathor that began in 2017. When did you start having UPG in your life? Was that something that was kind of always part of your life, but you weren't quite sure about it, or nothing at all? Or was that just out in 2017, out of the blue, it just started happening? How about can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. No, I mean, well, generally, yes, out of the blue, that was my first UPG experience that happened to me. And, before that, I was very skeptical. I probably would have dismissed most people who believed in any kind of a occult manifestations or anything like that out of hand. I was very skeptical until it happened to me, and then became non-skeptical. But that was the first time I had, I guess prior to that, I've always, I liked horror movies and comic books and things like that. So I had exposure to like horror movies and the devil and occult stuff, which I kind of liked, but it was not like a must have for me. I kind of liked it. And then, I've been going to New Orleans like every year for many years, at least since Katrina. I think that was back in 2005, maybe. I go to New Orleans almost every year, and I do get a feeling kind of like a spiritual feeling when I go there, even when I was a skeptic, even before I had UPG, and I would have considered myself a new atheist at the time because I was kind of into that movement. I was like way, way off to the other side. But I always had like a kind of a touchy-feely, warm spiritual feeling, and I loved going to voodoo shops and like smelling the incense, and I liked it. And, at a certain point I did, I picked up a book on voodoo because I thought maybe this is calling out to me. But when I looked at it, I kind of, realized it really wasn't for me. It wasn't really clicking with me. So I kind of just put it aside. No, but I still enjoy when I go to New Orleans, which I do regularly. I still pop into those shops, and now it has this more meaning for me than it did back then. But that may have been like beginning. Maybe a gate was starting to crack open through all my trips there, and feeling kind of a vibe that it does have a special vibe to that city. So there is a chance that maybe the gate started opening there, and then, and then it got pushed way open when I had my experience back in 2017. So I can't discount that. But I can't be sure. There was nothing I could really say, hey, I had, when I was in New Orleans, I had experience. Yeah, I've had experience with like Mai Tais and with, other things down there, but not necessarily on the spiritual side of things. So, but I can't discount that maybe something started opening up in me that left me like open for when the gods decided to reach out to me. And I can't really say why. I think I was just in the right place at the right time when I had my UPG. So, right. But I can't say for sure. But that was the beginning, and I was really, if you would have known me before that time, back in, since from 2000 to about 2015, I was a new atheist, and I would have been very skeptical about anybody making any kind of paranormal claims or claims of UPG or any. I was kind of like an adversary. So I've really come a long way in my personal transformations here, and I'm happy about that. I can't say I'm proud of it because I didn't do anything to do it, but it's happened to me, and I'm very happy about it.
That's awesome, and I'm glad you're happy about it. I'm in a similar boat. Just like a decade ago, I was a little adversarial and very incredulous towards a lot of the claims that I now just take on face value for certain. Gabby, I pass the microphone back to you, and I will be right back.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think that's super cool. And I guess since we're talking about, sort of your spiritual journey, you mentioned, 2017, you have this first experience with Hathor, and now she's sort of the center of your practice. Can you tell us a little bit about what that journey looked like? Like, how did you discover that this entity who was reaching out to you was Hathor? And, what does your relationship look like now?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll start off from the beginning. Like I said, I couldn't understand what this personality in my psychic spaces was telling me at the time. I couldn't remember when I arose out of my trance. I couldn't understand any of the language that was being used. I just knew the tone of voice. So, but it had the sensation like somebody was shouting at me from far away, and that I was just picking up an echo or something like that, or a very, very small, I was just I couldn't really hear what was happening. That's the sensation I had, is that it was like a voice from very far away. So when I started using the apparatus, there's like a resolution with the apparatus. Like I can turn it up so that I get a lot of data points off of it. And then when I started using it, I used it like that with very high resolution. So there'd be a lot of data points. That means there was a lot of anagrams to work out. There was just a lot of data. There were letters of the alphabet. There's like symbols and words. So, and I was working with this, and from working with this, I came to recognize that there was words that were in a language that I was not familiar with. And I determined that there was some analogy to some languages that were from the African continent, from the kind of like central eastern part. So that would be like Ethiopian dialects and Somali dialects. I noticed there were some words that were very analogous to those words in those languages. So as I started decoding some of these words and translating them, I realized that there were symbols and names that I was documenting there. And what I was documenting was this person who was in my psychic space was telling me their own history, and they're like introducing themselves to me, telling me their name, where I'm from, and what I've been doing, like how long I've been doing it, how long I've been around. And that's some of the first uses the apparatus gave me that data. As the guys like later on started working with me to develop my interpretation kind of language, my interpretation protocols for being able to determine what the messages say, she recommended the resolution come down so I don't get as many data points, so that when I do like an oracle, there's not 100 points I have to look at and analyze. Maybe there's 25, something like that. So the resolution's turned down. So I got mostly information about the goddess was from these first few runs where I was like going through a lot of data points, hundreds of data points, and in different languages. Mostly, like I said, the ones that were really important, I thought were in kind of use Somali and Ethiopian words. And I know nothing of these cultures. I am not an expert on African cultures or even geography or anything. But this was just using simple Google searches. I was able to make these determinations here. And I started getting the picture that the goddess Hathor that we know from the Egyptian wall paintings and stuff, that was like just a later iteration and kind of a later syncretization of a much older spiritual being. And I have some indications to the point where the being that was in my psychic spaces indicated certain archaeological sites in those areas, like near Ethiopia, in that region where it had significance to her. And those sites are 30,000 years old. So I think this being who was like in contact with me is not the maybe 6,000-7,000 year old like Egyptian goddess that we normally would think of, but really a being that's much older and goes back to the history itself. It goes back to prehistoric times. Generally, and when she pointed out to me this region, maybe that was the first time the historicism or the documentation of her belief began. That's what I kind of got out of the communication there. So that's where I was at. And then a little later on, there's a lot of evidence now that a lot of some of the religion from the dynastic Egyptian times did come from sub-Saharan Africa and were syncretized and morphed into the Egyptian religion. It's not as like monolithic, even though they're very traditional people and within their own cycles. They were very conservative, but in the period of thousands of years leading up to dynastic Egypt and even the pre-dynastic times, I think there's a lot of syncretization going and a lot of influence from other areas, particularly sub-Saharan Africa and most probably to Asia, West Asia and India and China too, most likely. And I mean, the way evolution works, everybody works with everything that's available. Nothing's wasted. So that's kind of how it worked. I've been talking. So the idea is that when I started using the device, it was at a very high resolution with a lot of data points, and I was able to ascertain these facts and this communication with the goddess, and that led me to her, many names for her, and she also intimated that the Hathor name and the Hathor symbol was more of an honorific than a personal name. It was more of like queen. That was I remember that was a symbol that she made the connection to me between a symbol that she gave me for Hathor and the symbol for queen, and there was like an equal sign in between. So I believe that it's like an honorific used by a goddess that probably had a way older history and was syncretized into Hathor. And you can tell, there's and Hathor herself evolved out of these lion-team goddesses, the goddesses that were lion-headed goddesses you see in a lot of cave drawings. And so these goddesses, and there's probably, the last I checked on Wikipedia, there's over 80 different Leontine goddesses. You kind of get the idea that these might have been regional spirits or, local spirits that were joined together, through either conquest or through, migration and became the beings that they became symbolized in Egyptian tomb paintings and then from then on into modern culture. So I think what we're looking at is a really, really old history that really went through an evolution to get us where we're at now in our current ideology of how we think about these deities in divinities. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Wow. That is phenomenal. And I'm going to definitely have to dive into that research of, kind of like the history of these Egyptian, gods and goddesses and kind of, that evolution of divinity, basically. That's fascinating. Thank you.
Yeah, there's when my website goes live, and I'll give you the information. Will be soon. I do have like a little paragraph and a little clip by this a scientist named Solange Ashby. Dr. Solange Ashby is her name, and she studies the migration of Nubian cultural activities as they move from Nubia, which is generally the area like to the south of Egypt, how those cultural attributes moved and changed up north into a dynastic Egypt. So she definitely has she is the scholar of that. So I give her the hats off because I am not a scholar myself, but I certainly can take advantage of her work and her academic prowess there, and she's really incredible. And there's really seeing a couple of videos of hers and looking at some articles that really, when I say something vibrates with me and resonates with my personal findings from UPG, it about knocked me off my chair. Basically, I knew that I was onto something that was real, not just real in my own psychic spaces, but real that other people could see it too. And that was really it's really kind of a shocking change when that happens.
Yeah, I definitely know that feeling. It is a wild experience to have this sort of psychic experience and then have it affirmed in the physical world, because then it's not just all in my head. There's actually something to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, there is something to it. Even though, just to clarify, when I call myself an atheo-pagan, I just say I only attest the reality of the divinities in my own psychic spaces. I don't make a judgment about what is actually manifest in time and space. Time and space are the two elements, I think, of what we commonly refer to as existence. I can't vouch one way or another if the divinities enter into those spaces of time and space. I certainly believe that they are in my psychic spaces, and that's how I define reality in terms of something in a psychic space, and I define existence in terms of time and space. So I certainly believe in the divinities in a reality way, in a psychic spaces way, but I can't attest one way or another in terms of existence. So I just wanted to get that out there, because I'm sure there's some occultists and other people who maybe have an issue with me. I hope not, but I do things according to my own sensations and how they affect me, and I express myself as clearly as I can. And I know enough about skepticism and in some philosophical type work to know that you don't want to overextend yourself, because you're just going to end up looking like a fool. And nobody likes to look like a fool. I mean, I certainly do all the time. Don't get me wrong, but nobody likes it.
Right. Oh, I absolutely. Hey, what does your new book that's coming out, does it have a title?
Yeah, Oracles of Hathor. That's the title.
Oh, very
so
cool.
It pretty much says what you get there. You're going to have 100 oracles from the goddess herself through me, her words, like interpreted through me. Each chapter will have one oracle and then a couple little paragraphs. Sometimes they're only one or two sentences, sometimes a whole paragraph. Like, so each oracle will have like two paragraphs also with it that are like just things I jotted down after trances and meditations relating to my work with the goddess. Also relating to general alchemy, on a very basic level, which is great for people who don't know a lot of alchemy. Just to me, it's kind of like maybe a few things just to get maybe people interested, so maybe they look into something else about alchemy. It does not go into a lot of like detail about what the medievalists were doing. It's just I throw out a couple terms as they came to me during my meditations, but you kind of get the gist of what alchemy is all about. You also, it includes, like in some of those sections, the hymns that I wrote for the goddess. As I was working with the apparatus, I wrote some hymns. I wrote some other myths for myself. And this material is also included in that section of the book. That would be not the oracle itself, but in the supplementary page. So it's like the oracle is going to be on the left side and the supplementary material is going to be on the right side. In the manuscript is 100 chapters long. So you have the 100 oracles and you have the 100 bits of supplementary material of various lengths, all short. I mean, even though the manuscript is over 200 pages long, I think the actual text is probably, is I can't even say, but what you have is pages where it's like mostly there's a lot of blank space on the page, and like in the words don't take up the whole page.
Yeah.
On the other hand, it sounds like, hey, this guy's trying to get out of something here, but actually not, because I really curated like that portion of the text. I mean, the oracles are the oracles. I interpreted what the goddess said. The other part I looked at very carefully, and I made like those portions really reflect what I was thinking at the time, to the point where a lot of the punctuation is custom. I usually maybe like if I ran a lot of this stuff through an AI that looked for punctuation errors, I would probably come up with many punctuation errors. But I wanted it to really express what I was feeling. So there might be something where you might be looking at it and go, this is a weird punctuation, but that is how I curated every word and every character basically in that text. So what you see is what I wanted to express. So the interpretation, when you read it, it might seem maybe a little clunky at times to you, or maybe it's going to seem like, wow, this guy could have expanded that a little bit, but that was exactly the way I wanted to express it. And to the point, yes, of each individual letter, capitalization, punctuation, the length of the line. Those are the types of things I was looking at. So that's what the form of that's what the book's going to be about. 100 short chapters, oracles of the goddess, and then supplementary material having to do with trances and meditations.
How cool. And what's the pen name that you're publishing under?
I use the name Magnus Malleus. That is my pen name. That's not my real name.
No.
I'm also, I do some other projects. I'm a musician, and I've written some other works, and I have another life where I'm not an occultist. Actually, I'm kind of compartmentalized. So I use Magnus Malleus as my philosopher, my occultist compartment. That's like the title of that. So it is my pen name. My publishing company that I put together is called Malleus Net. Basically, it's called that because years and years ago, I think back in 2000, I got the domain malleus.net. And I've had it all these years. Actually, I lost it one time because I wasn't paying attention, and somebody bought it from this internet company, and then I had to buy it back, and that cost me a couple dollars. But I was glad to get it back because it's kind of my personal thing. So now, yes, that's what I'm going to be using. My website's going to be at malleus.net. www.malleus.net. And that's kind of also the name of the publishing company too. And they're based on my pen name, which is my philosopher name. I use. So I have another name that, I'm sure a savvy internet person could figure out what my real name is, but it's not really a big concern to me. I just like to compartmentalize my life because I do some other things. I'm kind of a compartmentalizer by nature. So I hope that that makes sense.
Absolutely. Oh, I'm excited. And how about the website? What's it going to be called?
It is, it's Malleus. Malleus.net. It's going to be, it's kind of a personal website because now there's no other occultists who are going to be published by Malleus.net. Maybe one day that would be great if there was. I would like to do that certainly, and I have some works. I didn't broach this topic yet. I'll come to this in a minute, but there are some other works that are probably going to appear on the website that are not my personal writings. And I'll breach that right now. I'll broach that topic right now, actually. There's a couple sections in my book that I transposed out of notebooks that my grandfather left me. I inherited some notebooks from my grandfather. He was a scientist, an industrial scientist, and he passed away in 1997. I inherited all his books. Most of them were like chemistry books. They weren't stored properly. They were all kind of moldy and like falling apart. And mostly it was just like I had to throw it out. I mean, they were mostly like really old chemistry texts, and chemistry texts like are updated periodically, so probably not as useful to students anyway. But unfortunately, those did not make it. But a lot of his personal notebooks going back into the 1920s were in pretty good shape. So I kept those. And there's a few entries that I transcribed out of his notebooks, like in Oracles of Hathor, that I thought were relevant to the oracle. So I use that in place of my own meditation. I transcribed these sections. Now, my grandfather was an industrial scientist. He worked mostly in coatings and varnishes. That was his specialty for most of his career. But when he started out in the 1920s as a student, he was in Europe studying at the Sorbonne and some other universities in Europe. He was interested in alchemy, and he was into the roots of science. He was particularly interested in Louis Pasteur and some writings of Louis Pasteur, particularly captured by Louis Pasteur's biographer from back in the old days, where my grandfather was fascinated by this stuff. And so he was kind of interested in, I don't know if you'd call it, I call it alchemy, but it was very much like on the border between like proto-science and alchemy. He was interested in those topics. And he built an electrical apparatus in the 20s when, it was not common to have a lot of electrical apparati. And he used it to test materials. And he tried to see if he could produce some like X-rays, which back then they called Röntgen rays. He tried to produce some things using electrical apparatus back in the 20s. Wow. So I found his notebooks, and I was really, once again, this was all after I started working in the occult spaces and after I was using my apparatus. I didn't really look through any of these books until then. I was like, holy smokes, Granddad was doing this kind of stuff too. So that really resonated with me. So I did include a couple of transcriptions in my book, and I do honor his name and his work. And he wrote quite a few articles. He wrote a good number of articles and works, mostly about coatings science. But right before he passed away, he was trying to invent the super medicine, which would be a medicine that would cure like HIV and cancer, and really which were like the big bogeymen of his day. He was trying to come up with a medicine that would cure all the big diseases of his time. So his last works are about creating the super medicine. So I have like a book, like his book documenting his experiments with that. And I hope to make some of those available on the website too. Of course, I wouldn't try to sell them as my own work. I'm just going to make them available because he's gone. I think the rest of my relatives and stuff who remember him, they'd probably be happy if their their kids or the grandkids or whatever maybe could learn a little something about it. This ancestor that they're not going to get to know. So I think it'll be valuable, even to members of my own family down the line. But I think I'll produce some of his works as best I can and make them available to the public, even though some of it, about the coding science, it's a little bit, I think it might be a little dry for some general public consumption, but I'll make those available to him. And his books on like the super medicine, and he was particularly interested in organizational theory, which is like kind of an interesting thing for a scientist and a chemist which he was to be working on. He was particularly interested in organizational theory, which, if you study like philosophy and look into social philosophy and political philosophy, those things kind of come up a little more often. So, I think there will be some value when I produce his works and make them available. So yeah, there'll be a little more to Malleus Net than just my work, but I'm hoping, it'll grow, and have more of my insight in the projects I'm working on in the occult spaces there. It is going to be my home and my publishing company. It's going to be a one-stop place for everything Malleus. That's the goal. So I'm hoping that right now it's pretty promising. All's fine and good with a website until you go live, and then I'm sure all the bugs are going to start running out of the wall. So we're going to have to test that pretty thoroughly when it comes out. But yeah, a lot of exciting stuff going on. But that'll be the place for all things Malleus. That's for sure.
Yay. Oh, we can't wait until it comes out. And even though we've only got a few more minutes left, are there any other family members of yours who are practitioners in any way?
I don't think so. It's largely I come from a pretty skeptical background overall. There's not a lot of occult practitioners in my family. In fact, even the person I'm married to is still very skeptical, and we don't really. My wife and I, we really don't discuss occult topics very often because she is, I think, still a card-carrying atheist of a new atheist type stripe and very skeptical. So we don't really discuss these issues a lot at length. But, we give each other plenty of spaces, and give each other plenty of room. And it's kind of like carved out kind of in my relationship, in my married relationship, kind of a space of my own that I can work in, which is kind of a nice thing to have. But I'm really the only one in my family who's doing this kind of work. Of course, like I said, Granddad, I think he had his moment with it, but drifted to the hard science kind of branch of the alchemical working environment. So yeah, I think I'd have to say I'm the one. I'm the one in my family.
Blazing the new trail. That's awesome. Sweet. Michelle, do you have any other questions before we wrap up?
My mind is just blown. I've got no other questions. I would love to talk to you after the book comes out, and I've got my hands on it because I definitely want a copy. Please let us know when the website goes live and when the book comes out. We would love to have you back on to talk a little bit more.
Oh, gosh, it's really great. You can guarantee that once my book's available, you're going to have a copy. Once my website's up live, you're going to have, it's malleus.net, www.malleus.net. Once I'm up live, I'm going to notify you guys, and you're going to have an opportunity. You could chime in and look at it and say, hey, Malleus, this is really a piece of junk. You got to fix it. I can do this. Now I'm going to be open to suggestions how to improve it, and make things better for all of us users in occult spaces. So I'm excited about that too, and excited about keeping you guys in the loop. I'm totally psyched, and I'm totally, anytime you want to have me on a panel or something, have some other occultists, I think it'd be great. I'd love to be part of a panel, especially having kind of like my skeptical, cranky background, and sure. In my transformations over time, I'd love to be part of a panel with other occultists, just so I can learn about other people's practices and how they cope from day to day, like in a world that can be hostile sometimes, and where you have to really look to find friends and like-minded individuals. So I'm psyched about being a guest again on the Eternal Void here with Jazz. It's been really great.
And where can people find you on the day-to-day?
You can find me on Blue Sky, Malleus at malleus.net. Go figure, something unusual there. That's my handle. And let's see, I just got on Instagram too, so I'm just learning how to use it. Now, I kind of wanted Instagram to be more for Malleus Net and like the things that are going on there. So I do have Malleus _net is my Instagram handle. So come on and give me a hard time on there too. I'm really learning that. It's a kind of a learning curve to me. I think I have 3 posts, just a couple images. And I'm just trying to network and meet other cultists there. Especially, I'm interested in meeting some devotees of goddesses there to see how people's personalities kind of adjust to living with the goddess, being integrated in their psyche. And it's like, I'm kind of looking at using Instagram to get those kinds of ideas and those kinds of experience, because you kind of look at videos and like a lot of like images and stuff. I think that helps me with getting in touch with those kinds of feelings.
Absolutely.
So yeah, come out and visit me. Give me a hard time. I love that. That's the main thing.
We certainly will. And yes, please reach out to Malleus, give him a hard time, engage. We're all looking forward to this book and this website. And we appreciate y'all taking the time to listen to another episode of the Eternal Void, but with Jazz podcast. You can support our podcast endeavors by helping keep the lights on and the hosting website paid for. We've got a Ko-Fi, links in the show notes. You can wad up a dollar bill or a pound or a dinero or whatever and throw it up the internet pipes to us, and we'll put that towards hosting duties. But yeah, other than that, you can find us on Blue Sky at serenasvoid.bsky.social. Our email address will be in the show notes. Leave a review, write us, let us know you're listening. Give us a hard time too. We really want to hear from our listeners. We appreciate y'all. And Gabby, where can people find you?
You can find me over on Blue Sky at cathonia.bluesky.social, the regular Blue Sky handle thing. And that's pretty much it. I'm also on Mastodon, but I'm never there.
Totally, I get it. And I'm Michelle, and you can find me on Blue Sky, elfinrake.bsky.social. Wishing you all a great week. Take care, and we will talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.